Such a pleasure to see all of you again at the summit, and welcome to the new folks in the room as well. Each year in this moment at Summit, this opening, I get a chance to really cast vision for the community, to look a little bit about where we've come from, talk a bit about where we are, and hopefully inspire a bit on where I hope we go together. Last year, I had a chance to talk about our identity as a venture-building ecosystem that's advancing redemptive entrepreneurship. And this year, I want to talk about another phrase that we use a lot, which is this idea that there's founders, funders, and innovators in the room here who are motivated by their faith to work on the major issues of our time. I want to look at that last phrase there as well as increasingly part of the aim of our work together. Every time we come together in this room, I think it's worth acknowledging that we stand on the shoulders of really a paradigmatic shift in theology of work over the past 40 or 50 years in the church. We have this ability to come in here and see our work as entrepreneurs and investors and funders and so on as a fundamental part of our reflection of the Creator. At the same time, we want to push beyond the ethical baseline when we talk about the redemptive and what's possible. We want to be part of cultural renewal and really believe that every Christian entrepreneur should be stretching their capacity to reshape the world. That is, the gospel applies not only to how we work, but maybe even more so to what we choose to work on and how we do that together. Praxis friend and Founders Fund partner Trey Stevens recently wrote a piece with Marky Wagner from Delphi Labs that I think speaks to this pretty well. It was called Choose Good Quests, and when I read it, I thought, I think there's something here for our community. In fact, I think their general ideas apply broadly to how we should think about Christian vocation. While their audience is steeped in the norms of Silicon Valley and the technology sector, and so they're writing to them, I want to do a bit of an adaptation of it today as they think about how we map personal and organizational endeavors into this 2x2, which of course we love 2x2s at Praxis. They say on the horizontal axis, we should think about either bad quests all the way to good quests. And on the vertical axis, we should be considering whether we're working on easy quests or hard quests out in the world. Listen to their perspective on what they see happening in Silicon Valley today. They say, even among the talented who choose a path of building, most take safe, incremental bets. Such pursuits not only fail to push the world forward, but pose a cost and opportunity. There are important challenges facing humanity that no one is working on, including critical and even existential challenges. In other words, if you are an exceptionally capable person, like so many of you in this room, failure to pursue a good quest is not neutral. It constitutes a loss for humanity. They go on to talk about this gaming metaphor, that's where quests come from, and the thought that each of us has a player level of some form. This is a combination of our God-given gifts, the experiences we have, the skills we've built over time, the networks we're a part of, but ultimately it's connected to our ability to attract resources. This might be casting vision and bringing incredible people into our team, or maybe the ability to attract a large amount of capital. Their general point is that the higher our player level, the harder things we should be trying because we have the ability to. Biblically speaking, I think this is a version of the parable of the talents from Matthew 25, or perhaps the famous line from Luke 12, to whom much is given, much is required. One thing I want you to think about when you think about player level 2 is not just your own personal player level, but how this is related to the other folks around you and the other people around you. See, I think we have individual player levels. I think our families have player levels because any quest we go on requires them. I think our organizations have player levels that grow over time, and certainly communities, including ours today, has a possibility set that changes over time and hopefully is growing in a direction of more and more possibility. Another way of stating the good quest thesis, I think, that might be familiar in terms to you is that as our authority, our capacity for meaningful action increases, we are responsible to move towards more vulnerability, our exposure to meaningful risk. These are, of course, the words of Andy Crouch, our partner for theology and culture, who we'll hear from later today. Andy's great idea here is that this is critical for our own personal flourishing. If we want to live a life of flourishing, we have to be up and to the right. And Trey's idea here, too, is that actually it's true for us personally, and it's true for us in society. If we want society to be flourishing, we need people who are working in that category of good, hard quests. As we think about society, though, it doesn't really want to encourage us to do these things. It encourages us to move to safety, most of the things around us. Our education, sometimes our parents, sometimes our LPs, whoever, they say, let's basically manage kind of inside of reasonable bounds, have reasonable goals. Even inside of Silicon Valley, it's about fast exits, or maybe just make a company that people want something from it. That's success. Or if we enroll in the nonprofit sector, sometimes we just have this nobility trap that we talk about. Well, we're in the sector, so we're doing good. That's enough. Maybe even as Christians, and we can look at this for ourselves at Praxis, we have this risk of running into subcultural off-ramps that are easier and less competitive than where the innovative edge is. Ultimately, I think all of these things are connected to what I'll just call our big vocational question. That is, as we experience success, are we de-risking our lives, or are we re-risking our lives for more and more possibility? You see, de-risking is actually the pathway towards bad quests. And it's hard to say or face, but an ethical quest can actually be a bad quest in the midst of all the needs that our world have and amidst a player level, if you're operating well below the hard quest that you could take on. We are, of course, terrified of taking on the biggest ideas in our hearts most of the time, if we're honest. In the provocative book, Turning Pro, by Stephen Pressfield, he writes very specifically to this. He says, sometimes when we're terrified of embracing our true calling, we'll pursue a shadow calling instead. The shadow career is a metaphor for our real career. Its shape is similar, its contours feel tantalizingly the same, but a shadow career involves no real risk. If we fail at a shadow career, the consequences are meaningless to us. Now, ironically, the temptation to avoid these things actually increases as our player level does. We would think that maybe we would try harder things the more and more resources we have, but actually we're encouraged to protect our winner script that we have in our mind. Maybe we've had success, maybe we're not as dependent on making something work. There's a lot of different options for us. And so it's not just the successful that try to find a redemptive quest in the world. Now, it may be tempting to hear all of this as the good hard quest. Okay, that must be a plea for more and more and more hard work, right? 80-hour weeks, burnouts, blitz scaling. Is Dave pushing us really hard to go here? Well, look, maybe those things are a part of this, but maybe that's part of all of our work all the time. We face those risks. But really, a good hard quest is about trajectory, not velocity. It's about what we're aiming for, what we're going after. And not all good hard quests are moonshots, where we have to say, oh, it's this binary outcome. We need $1 billion and a 1,000-person team, and if we don't take the hill, we just lose. In fact, most things that we pursue in the world are more like lily pad innovation strategy. If you're familiar with it or not, it's basically the idea that you still have a very big aim, but you build small things along the way so that you can achieve more and more, and basically you can increase your player level so you can take on that ultimate goal that you've set out to do. Of course, that just requires a long time horizon. Culture, is the product really of someone's vision over a decade ago or 2 decades ago or more. And again, it's really about the aim here. One of my favorite quotes from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi says that the unifying similarity among geniuses and innovators is not cognitive or affective, but motivational. What is common among them is the unwillingness or inability to strive for goals that everybody else accepts. See, while Trey is saying, hey, if you're brilliant, can you go on a hard quest? Can you do something for the society in that way? Mihai is saying, but you don't have to be brilliant. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room or the most charismatic person in the room. Actually, just having a radically countercultural goal and sticking to it gets you a long way. That's actually really good news for us because 1 Corinthians 1:26 reminds us, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were of noble birth. So, if I can get you to agree that we should be trying good hard quests, we might ask the question, what makes a good hard quest redemptive? Well, I think there's an incredible kind of synergy between the 2x2 that we've been given and so much of the language that we talk about at Praxis. First of all, I think the journey from bad quest to good quest is actually from exploitative to redemptive. That's what can sit on the horizontal axis for us. Of course, that's the journey of creative restoration in our world today that we talk about so often. This work, of course, is not simply technological, but it's personal, social, moral, spiritual. And shaping these things is very hard work. To actually do these things, we know these problems can be intractable in our world today. And so we should acknowledge that the harder the quest we choose to go on, when we can choose easy options, those quests become redemptive because it's sacrifice that we're taking on. Maybe we're taking on financial sacrifice. Maybe we're taking on the sacrifice of doing things, working when we don't have to work anymore. Maybe we're taking on the sacrifice that our reputation could be lost if this big thing doesn't work out, and I've already got a pretty solid one. Here's a few other characteristics I think are true of a redemptive quest. They're truly consequential to the world. They're worth failing at. They have a cascading or catalytic effect. It's really affecting systems. They're focused on people or institutions that are at risk and somehow protect the vulnerable. They move the Overton window in culture, which is to say they shift what's possible or what's normal. They require sustained sacrifice and some repeated re-risking, a sort of dying to self. They're often non-obvious from a market perspective and demand imagination. They rely on long-term vision, not near-term hype, and they have a patient hope to them. Maybe most importantly, they're compelled by love, and they're dispassionate about credit. They know it requires many actors for change to be seen. So let's connect this idea of redemptive quest back to the top of the major issues of our time. Many of you know that last year we released a list of over 30 opportunities for redemptive innovation. This is our way of looking at what was happening in our community and our portfolio, assessing that also through the lens of a set of theses, of ideas of what kind of ventures we think we needed to see going forward. We're fortunate, I think, to see how a number of people in the community and adjacent to the community are on redemptive quests connected to ORIs. I'm going to highlight just a couple of those real quickly here today. The first is just one of my favorite stories because it's so surprising. It's related to preventing war and reversing its consequences. And it's surprising because its source is a quantitative mutual fund in Houston. This is John Montgomery, if you know him. He's a Praxis friend and mentor and started Bridgeway funds in the 1990s. He had a pretty radical business model. He had a whole bunch of ideas around different ways to structure performance fees, compensation caps. There was enough in the mutual fund in and of itself. But he had a radical twist. He said that 50% of firm profits were going to go to better the world. And it wasn't just John's profits, it was the firm. He wanted to build a culture at Bridgeway that cared about something more than just their profitable trading. So a few years later, in 2000, John hired Praxis mentor Shannon Sedgwick Davis to come in and start the Bridgeway Foundation. See, they had formed an idea, a kind of crazy idea, that a quantitative mutual fund in Houston could take on global genocide, which feels totally unrelated. But it was John's redemptive quest, and it was Shannon's too, and they have taken on that work over the past 2+ decades. Maybe most notably, getting engaged in complicated ways with the Ugandan army to train them to dismantle Joseph Kony's Lord's Resistance Army, obliterating one of the sources of really the most evil in the world. What a beautiful quest they have been on. We also have a lot of people in our community rethinking mission and discipleship in the post-Christian West. There's a lot of conversation around where the church is today and where it's going and where it's headed. I wanted to take this moment in our opening to honor one person who I think is probably on many of our hearts and minds today. That's the redemptive quest and life of Dr. Timothy Keller. What a quest he was on, if you think about it. He first chose to go into Manhattan and start a church. And when he did that, that was a crazy idea. He was doing a good, hard quest in and of itself. And of course, he produced the best-selling books a few years later. This would be enough in most cases for most pastors. But he had a vision for creating more organizations, a Center for Faith and Work, a Hope New York, which was doing philanthropy in the city. And then he said, all the things that we've developed here should go to the world. And so he re-risked his reputation, his resources, his ability to attract them, hire people, raise money, so he could start City to City, which has become a global church planting initiative and taking global faith and work around to all sorts of places. Many of you in the room here have been deeply involved with City to City at really every level of their work. I think when you look back at his life, and it is such a powerful life to look at, you have to see that it was animated through a redemptive quest. I heard Keller, I oversaw a conversation that Keller had with a pastor who was going through some difficult times, and Keller's word for that pastor that always stuck with him was, I bet you have one more big push in you. Last but not least, I want to talk about renewing the neighborhood, something that so many of you are working on. We heard from Mary Elizabeth, all the ecosystem builders in the room today, all the people who care about place. And I want to tell you a story about a venture you're going to hear from tomorrow in our portfolio as some really exciting early stage quests that are just underway. One that particularly stands out. This is Dr. Nashley Cephas, who's here with us in the room. That's right. So Nashley is one of an all too few number of Black women who've had success in tech, starting a company and selling it to Amazon a few years ago. Now, most people in her position would say, hey, this is great. Give me the house and the boat and the car and the retirement plan, and maybe I'll dabble in a few things and speak. That's not Nashley's way. You'll see that if you meet her. She said, hey, I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, and there's not many people who have opportunity like I had, and I want to make more opportunities. So she took her winnings, her proceeds, and proceeded to buy several city blocks of abandoned properties in downtown Jackson, Mississippi, to start the Jackson Technology District. She recruited Dr. Preston Burse to join her in leading BeanPath, a nonprofit you'll hear about tomorrow, to train up folks in learning technology in Jackson, to change the future trajectory of not only in many individuals who come through that, but the possibility of changing the trajectory of the city, which has struggled for so long. It's beautiful to see this redemptive quest. And it's beautiful to see so many like it in our portfolio, which I'm proud to share is now over 215 active ventures with over $600 million in annual revenue, employing 6,300 people in redemptive employment umbrellas, if you will, in 110 countries, working across over 30 of these ORIs. We're fortunate to see a 91% survival rate for our ventures or acquisition. And that's not a demonstration that they're not taking enough risk, I don't think. I think it's an example of how this community continues to come behind them and help them do hard things at a rate that exceeds that of their peers. One of the indicators of that is over $115 million now of early stage philanthropy and venture capital that's helped them get their ventures off the ground and enabled them to raise billions from many other sources. Now, we also come to you in a market right now that's really complicated. A lot of people are vanishing from early stage capital. They're taking cues from basically the tech markets and tech IPOs as an indicator that maybe they shouldn't get involved. But I would encourage you, as you meet entrepreneurs in this room, if you're a funder and you're thinking about getting involved in things, there are still problems in the world today that need to be solved regardless of the markets. And I would encourage you to get involved in relationships that might lead to going on redemptive quests with these founders. In fact, this is so connected to how I want us to think about redemptive quests in community, because they're different than when you go it alone. There's some things that should be different about what we do and how we work together. And I'm going to return to the gaming metaphor, if you'll allow me. For those of you who are familiar, and for those of you who aren't, maybe you can look up some of these terms afterwards. But first of all, I think in the Praxis community, we should be giving players extra lives. All right, we got some gamers. First of all, this might mean additional missional capital. It might mean a softened landing in Adventure's final season. It might mean a chance at a second startup, or even a stable job in a time of recovery, because not every season is a time for a redemptive quest. At the same time, some player levels are lower than they should be in light of evenly distributed, God-given talent across the body of Christ. And we should be helping those people level up. This might be gender, ethnicity, age, educational background, all sorts of things, biases that are implied when people go out to try to attract those resources. We should be looking at who is not attracting the resources that they should be and help bridge that gap. Lastly, I want us to be reminding each other that we are spiritually boosted. Our player level is not on earthly terms. We have, according to 1 Corinthians, the mind of Christ. We have the opportunity for daily prayer with our Father. We have the Holy Spirit in us, and we're members in the global body of Christ, this generous, generous body. This should create a totally different calculus of possibility for our work. And we should acknowledge that the pursuit of a redemptive quest is fundamentally a spiritual battle, and we need each other to spur one another on to good deeds. Let me close with a few thoughts on redemptive history. I think redemptive history is a record of God empowering individuals on hard quests, in community, creating deep change that lasts over generations. If we look through the Bible, we see Noah, Abraham, Moses, Esther, David, Ruth, Boaz, Mary, Paul, and of course Jesus, whose life was obviously the hardest, most redemptive quest there ever has been. We sit in this room thinking about the things that we are because of these folks. They have inspired us. They give us hope to continue on. At the same time, if we look at the church today, in the past decades, maybe there's a little bit of a change that's gone underway that we should consider. Praxis community member and Belmont University president Greg Jones wrote a book a few years ago called Christian Social Innovation. In it, he recounts a conversation he had with the late Greg Dees, who's kind of considered the father of social entrepreneurship in academia. He's not a believer. And he asked Greg Jones, he said, "What happened to the church? My field wouldn't exist in business schools if it wasn't for the loss of interest in social entrepreneurship and innovation in the church. It's as if you all had a meeting somewhere around 1970 and decided to quit. For much of American history, anything that was truly innovative, particularly for the social good, was done by people of faith." Greg reflected on this and saw it was absolutely true and wondered what happened. I think looking back on the founding of Praxis, it's this question and this reflection on what happened that's really animated us for over a decade. That's why I think our redemptive quest at Praxis is to reestablish the church's creative and prophetic contribution on the major issues of our time. This is not an organizational quest. This is fundamentally something that can only be accomplished in this community. It's up to all of you. It's up to all of us to do it together. I think together we need to cultivate a community, frankly, where crazy is a compliment, where spiritual practices such as daily prayer and Sabbath spark the imagination, where all work and money is missional, and where one's identity is not bound in a conventional definition of success. We should be a place where, as Praxis venture partner Dave Evans says, grace means go. With this in mind, I want you to ask you to consider something over the next 3 days. Are you on a redemptive quest? If so, what is it? It would be powerful to be able to articulate it. If you're not, what could it be? Is there something for you here? Connected to that, how might the difficulty level of your quest be proportionate to your personal or organizational player level? Are you doing something that's a little too easy, maybe? Or are you on a hard quest? And really importantly, outside of the Praxis community here, do the relationships and communities you're a part of encourage you, or do they actually discourage you from going on a redemptive quest? Elton Trudblood once said, "The major danger is not that we shall fail to appreciate past models, but that we shall lack the courage to be sufficiently bold in our creative dreaming." Whatever else may be the character of the redemptive society which the crisis of our time demands, it is at least clear that the society must make the habit of adventure central to its life. For those of you who are prompted by this talk to consider a new quest, or expand your vision based on the momentum that you have, or if you just need some friends and co-conspirators to sustain you in your adventure, I do hope that you'll continue to find the Praxis community to be a deep partner in these pursuits, a place where the radically redemptive quest is completely reasonable.